Welcome back. So this week we're going to dive into a little bit around the audio system, how it was wired originally, and then start looking at what ways we can update it to modern, sort of more modern equipment, reduce some of the weight and some of the complexity within the car. Last week, and we will release a standalone video once we've got a bit more to it, we managed to make some cuts in the bumper to make the front bumper removable. Once those are cleaned up, and we will have a couple of extra bumper lines in the car, but it will mean that we may not have to reduce the size of the bumper depending on the wheel fitment. We have got some wheels on order. We were doing a lot of measuring and stuff, so it's currently with no wheels. I'll put it in as on stands. We're not going to do any more cuts or anything into the body kit itself until the new wheels are on, the fitment's right, and then we can make sure that we can cut as little as possible out of the kit. So this week, what we're really going to look into is we're going to dig into the boot, remove some of the amplifiers, gain access to the hydraulic controls. I'm pretty certain the valves are seeping through and they're reacting to each other. So we want to have a look to see whether or not we can get some new valves put in, and then at least we can have a sit down and have a bit of a game plan on what our next steps are and what the paces are moving forward. So this is the current boot setup. So we've got a big 15-inch Audiobahn subwoofer, and then the 6 Audiobahn amps that circle round. Some of the issues with it though is, as you can see, it's an MDF boards where it's all screwed onto, and it's all a little, these front ones are quite flappy. Obviously the wood is 20 odd years old, plus it did spend a lot of time sat out in the moisture. So I'm probably looking to replace the wood potentially with some aluminium profile, something like that. So when they go back in, it'd be nice and solid. So we're going to look at, and then we've got a load of fuse boxes along the top that control the amps. One of the big things is though, I don't really know what's doing what. We've got a couple of RCAs going in. We've got 6 on this side. So what we really need to do is dig through and see which amplifier is doing what, and then work out whether or not we can either simplify or change up some of the wiring to suit on that. So first job is to remove the sub, and I've already taken out the screws, so it literally just pulls out. As I say, it's a big 15-inch Audiobahn. And then we want to look at removing the sub box. Now the sub box goes all the way down into the spare wheel well. There are a couple of screws along the top, and I'm wondering whether or not those are what's holding this whole top piece in. So we will pull the seal around the back, we'll whip out some screws there and see how it comes out. Okay, so this piece is just on a couple of clips, and by the looks of it on the front, there's a couple of bolts going down through. After we picked up the car, one of the things that stayed really well in condition was the boot, as it had been sealed up and no water had got in. Now, apart from a bit of moisture and stuff over the years, the boot's really survived well. So I've never had any reason to strip the boot down. So there's a bit of a learning curve of how the boot all went together. And in all fairness to, as we all know the history and some of the issues with this car, love it or hate it, the actual install that Charisma did into the car is pretty impressive and pretty well built. I mean, it still looks good after 20 odd years, and also sitting for 5 years with water in the bottom of it. The lever's held up well, nothing's peeling, none of the glue's pulled. Some of the MDF is a bit gone now, but that's moisture and it's the nature of MDF. But in all fairness to Charisma and to the workmanship that they've done, you really couldn't argue it. And actually, like with this, they've made it where it's quite modular, and you can relatively easy pull a lot of the trim pieces off. So that went quite a lot easier than expected. And this piece comes off as well. Really nice to get in and get some of this leather cleaned up and refed. all fairness, I think I'm probably going to put the screws back in here because that's not really going to be on our way, and I can't see us changing that. Okay, right, so what we're going to do with the amps is I'm just going to grab some tape, and we're going to label everything up. So amps will be labelled 1 to 6, and then we'll cluster all the RCAs up. They have got, to be fair, they are labelled, but I don't have anything to reference those labels. And then we'll start taking some pictures of as we go as well. There is a top panel. I'm not quite sure how that's connected yet. It looks pretty well in there, but it is. Maybe we'll have to have a look. I'm quite concerned that I don't want to ruin the lever. I can't really see how it's been bolted into place. It may just be resting on top of the amplifiers. We can have a look as we go. The big one is we want to get into this one, because behind this one is all the suspension. So pulling that one out is quite a priority for today, just so I can get to the valves. And I also really want to understand, there's 2 switches for the hydraulics in the car. I can't work out, I think because the valves are leaking, whether or not it's left and right or front and back, because each valve seems to react on all 4. Whenever you click either button, it makes a reaction on all 4 hydraulics. So we'll see how that goes. But first of all, I'm just going to take some pictures, grab some tape, and we'll start labelling. So another one, what we want to do is just label all the amps. Just so we know exactly. So if something's not working when it goes back in, if we know everything's back in the same spot, that's going to help us work out what's where. And with the wire in, if we know it's amp 5, we can use that as our wiring scale. So we're into 6. Each one of these amps I also want to take out. I want to take these front covers off, give them a repolish, also get back in. This one's got a tendency of the lights on it sometimes work, sometimes don't. I've had a couple of them apart in the past, and there was a bit of dry solder and a few bits and bobs, so it'd be a good chance to get a part of a real good refresh on them. Pictures with this stuff is always key. Sticking a number 1 on there, so we all know they've come from amp 1. Just going to tuck back out the way, do the same on these one. So next step is we're pop out some of the screws. Now it is all disconnected. Underneath the car is it all runs on an Anderson socket. So one thing we will be doing is, you see where all the wire in here is just exposed wire gone in. We'll be putting ferrules on the end of all this wire in, just to make sure it's got a nice secure connection and it's not going to come out and generate any problems for us. Just for now, we'll wrap all that as well. for number 1. We do want to free up all this wiring as we go, because we'll be taking a look and seeing what we're keeping, what we're replacing. I do want to make it in the future so for any repairs that we're not having to unwire things. I'm going to put everything onto connectors, so it's going to take quite a lot of time to get up and running, but once it's on connectors it then means to remove anything we're literally just unbolting and unplugging, put colour-coded heat shrink on the connectors, and then we haven't got to keep going back to diagrams and stuff. It should be pretty self-explanatory when it's coming apart and going back together. Move on to number 6. Okay, so number 6 looks like this was the amp for the 15-inch sub, because I see it's only got 2 wires on it, and it was going straight in, and they're bridged across the channel. This is one of the issues we have. So this was how that was connected. So it was only clipped off with one side put in, and as I pulled the amp out, that one actually just fell out anyway. So unfortunately, this is why we have to go through really and pull it all apart. After 20 years of being there and unknown, it makes sense to double check, triple check everything. Because what we don't want to happen is the same as what happened with the blue one, and it catch fire. So again, we'll wrap all these together. So we know where they came from. That's going to help us later on when we track back to some of the fuse holders and all of that stuff, so we can see exactly where everything was in with the amps in. We've got the layout. So what I'm trying to ascertain now, if there's anything behind these fuse holders that are holding this shelf in. They were quite clever in hiding a lot of mounting holes and things underneath other areas. As I say, it's in all fairness to Charisma, it was a lovely, lovely looking build. Yeah, by the looks of it, there's a screw behind this one. So this is some of my concern with some of this build. I'll show you that again. That big chunky 0 gauge cable there. Actually, it's all frayed, and only a small amount of it has actually gone into the distribution block. But as I say, there's a little screw up there. I imagine it's likely to be the same on this one. So yeah, all the tiles are hanging out, so we will just put some retainers on some of these, and that will stop that from happening. When we reassemble this, we'll probably use some stainless steel screws, again just to help with keeping everything in place. There's another screw just there. Quite interesting about that. So that one there I never had a fuse in, and everything worked. It was just a show cable. There's nothing actually in the fuse holder itself. Okay, so right, that's revealed a bit more for us to work with. Right, and we'll continue, so we'll start taking more of the amps out. Now weirdly, it looks like that one, it's not got any RCA cables in, so that might not be even being used at all, it's just there for show. We've got 6 in this one, 4 in this one, another 4 in this one. So it looks like that one is it's just there to lit up and be on show. Right, we'll start. Okay, this one's going into a load of Y splitters. So my guess is these are for the two 12-inch subs either side in the rear. Right, so that's it. That's all 6 amplifiers out. The next step now is to, I'm going to whip these out. I'm going to take some measurements, whip these out, and then look at, I'm probably going to replace this with some aluminium profile to allow the amps to bolt to. You're not going to see any of it. It will be more sturdy. As I say, this is quite floppy and quite flappy in places. It's done well, but I can now get to the solenoids for the hydros, so I can have a look at that in a minute. And we've got everything wrapped and labelled, so we know where all the power cables are going, and then we can go on to the inside. So there we have down there, so we can all go through. This here is a power cap. I don't know even if it works. But what we can now see is we've got the rear hydraulics there, we've got the spring box. So you've got the hydraulic there, goes into the spring box there. That's teed across to this side. That's the line going to the front. That's teed along. So we'll have a little look on that at some of the where it's all going from there, and then have a look to see what it is I need to do to try and get that back to where it needs to be. Right, the next one is, so we'll go inside, we'll pull the power cap out. Okay, right, so we're back inside. What we have here is, from the other side, is a great big power cap. So next step is to remove this. Now, if you look down closely in the window here, you can see that the I think one of the capacitors are probably blown, so it is dead now. So time to get rid of it. You have to be really careful with capacitors. So although the battery voltage has been disconnected, and this one I've already tested and it is completely dead, they will hold a charge even when you disconnect the battery. So there's normally a sort of prime up and prime down the discharge procedure you do with them. It's always worth bearing that in mind, because they will give you one hell of a belt. That's a hell of a chunk out of the way. So what we can see is all the speaker cables from the amplifiers. Now all of these ones that are disconnected, they were going to the speakers were up along here. I'm going to be remaking some of this because they are just sat in there, all the crossovers from the speakers. And then you've got these ones going to the side speakers. And then, yeah, so these ones down here run into the front door speakers. These are front door speakers. This is to the subs on the side. And these are to the rear side pod speakers. So I probably can reuse a lot of the cabling, it's probably fine. But again, what you see is there's a lot of cables that have been pulled out over time, not working. So some of it I will rerun. We'll probably build a housing for that to sit in so it's not rattling around. And all it is your crossovers, which we'll have to pull out and test those, or all of those as well. One of these power cables, that was all split off and that was going to run all the monitors. These ones here, what we've got down here is a big bus bar for all the earths. These are to the front door speakers and the sub. See here where that power cup's gone, is all rusted through a bit. And we've got all the RCA cables, so they're all caught up under the seat, going to this audio system. So I'm going to be, instead of with the original system, we had the DVD player and the stereo there. I'm going to get rid of that because I'm probably going to put an Xbox in or something that's going to take up that space. So I'm probably going to locate the stereo at the front. So the RCA cables will run to the front. So we'll look at stripping all of those out. Okay, so our main power and cables come in here. We will carry on with taking the power cables out. Right, okay, so I'm just going to whip some of these ones off of this buzz bar, because for the most part it's not really that needed. Removing a lot of the unused stuff that's going to be on here now. So this is all about simplifying. I mean, the good news is a number of the wire, quite a lot of the wiring on here is to a good standard, so we may be able to reuse some of it. Okay, so essentially what that leaves us with is some power. Subwoofer and some other cables. So it's looking a lot easier to understand. I apologise, these videos may be a bit boring for some, but until we start putting the new stuff on, it's a lot of it is working out what we have, what we need to keep, what we need to get rid of. As we're working forward. Right, so next one to look at will be hydraulics. Right, so now I can actually see into the car. We can see what we have and we can start drawing it out to work out what's going where. So you've got the rear shock over there, rear shock here, that's going up. It's coming up from the rear shock into a T, to the spring box, going across, more secure. I've got an idea of what with the hydraulics. I think I'm going to replace the valves that are on it. Also the pump's a bit loose, so just a case of tightening it up. Right, so that's probably it for this week. I appreciate some of these updates aren't the most interesting to everybody and they're not full of exciting stuff. Unfortunately, until we strip this down, we don't really know what we're looking at to be able to build it back up again. So I've got to be quite methodical in the way I take it apart. I just don't want to be stripping it all down and not sort of knowing where I'm going. And I need to be building plans to build it back up into the same as what it was, just better behind the scenes. So as I'm working, I'm taking a lot of measurements on finding places and locations for new things. So it's either I try and collect all this together and do a bigger video with hopefully some good steps moving forward, or just do these smaller videos as we go weekly. We have got some new stuff that's just turned up. As I say, we've got new wheels that are on order. Some of the new power systems that we're going to be running are on order. And some bits have arrived. So it won't be, in a few weeks' time, we'll start pinning stuff back together and you can see it start taking shape. But ultimately, it's starting to, we've got a plan formulated now. Once the new wheels are here, we can understand the level of chopping we need to do to the kit, if any at all. We've gone up in wheel size in the hope that potentially that might give us some of the lift that we need. I can start working on brackets and mounting things and all of that sort of stuff. And then once everything's there, it will start coming together and start looking like a car again. Although I thought the boot was quite interesting in the way it's made. It's been really nice to see how Charisma sort of built the things, and actually it was quite modular and relatively easy to take apart. In all fairness, a lot of the sort of wood and things not in the best condition, but it's 25-year-old MDF that is in a car that had been sat in water for a couple of years. So in all fairness, everything's held up pretty well, and at a bare minimum it enables us to get in there and give everything a really good clean as we start looking at putting it all together. One of the big things I'm going to do though is with rebuild, all of these cables and stuff, I'm going to do some smaller cables coming off the amp with quick connectors. So if I ever need to take it apart in the future, I can just unplug it. All of the power cables are going to have ferrules put on the end just to make sure that they are crimped and they are put in place properly. Again, I'm quite tempted to whether or not to pick up some quick connects. So at least they're easier to unplug going forward, but we'll see on that. But that's really it for this week. It was more of exploring what was there and plan moving forward. We've got about 6-7 months before reunion, so it's going to be a busy few months. But as I say, would you guys prefer less videos with more progress in, or are people actually interested in the really nitty-gritty behind the scenes of how these were built and how it's going to go back together? By all means, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.